Orchids. They're just gorgeous, right? Probably one of the most popular houseplants out there. But let's be real, they can also be tricky. You bring one home, it's perfect, covered in amazing flowers, and then the last one drops. And that's the moment where a lot of us start to feel a little bit of panic.
Right? The show's over. So, is that it? Is the plant dead? Should you just toss it? Well, the good news is absolutely not. The end of the blooms is really just the start of your journey with this incredible plant. So the very first thing we need to do is figure out if your orchid is actually healthy.
Okay, first things first, don't panic. If the flowers are gone, but the leaves are still a nice green color and feel firm, then hey, congratulations, your plant is totally fine. It's just taking a well-deserved rest. Blooming takes a ton of energy, you know? Now, where you do need to worry is if you see yellow, mushy leaves, or roots that are all brown and squishy. That's our cue to put on our detective hats.
So, let's learn how to read the signals your orchid is sending you. I promise, once you understand its language, taking care of it becomes so much easier. And usually, the first sign of trouble starts with the leaves.
You've probably seen this before. The leaves get all wrinkled and limp, and your first thought is, oh, it must be thirsty. So you give it some water. But the leaves stay limp. Maybe they even get worse. This is probably one of the most common problems people run into, and the cause is not what you'd think. So get this. It's a total paradox. Wrinkled leaves mean the plant is dehydrated, sure, but that dehydration can come from either not enough water or from too much water. How does that even make sense? Well, if you overwater it, the roots rot, and rotted, damaged roots can't absorb any water to send up to the leaves, so the plant is just sitting there in a puddle, literally dying of thirst. Crazy, right?
To figure out what's really going on, you've got to check the roots. Healthy roots are nice and firm, kind of plump. They'll be a silvery gray or white color when they're dry, and then they'll turn this awesome bright green right after you water them. Unhealthy roots, on the other hand, well, they're a different story. They'll be brown or even black, and they feel mushy and soft when you touch them. They might just fall apart in your fingers.
Now, if you do find root rot, don't give up. You can often perform a little plant surgery. First, gently slide the orchid out of its pot. Then, with a clean pair of scissors, carefully snip off all of those brown, mushy, dead roots. After that, repot it in a fresh, chunky orchid mix. Something like bark chips is perfect. This gives the healthy roots a brand new start in a healthier home.
All right, so now we know how to spot and fix a major problem. Let's talk about how to prevent those problems in the first place. And it really all comes down to two things: light and water. Getting that balance right is key.
Think of your orchid's leaves as a little report card for its lighting situation. What you're aiming for is a nice, healthy, medium grass green. If the leaves are a really dark green, it means the plant is working super hard to get light and probably isn't getting enough to rebloom. On the other hand, yellowish leaves or, worse, brown scorched spots, yeah, that means it's getting way too much direct sun.
And it's not just about how bright the light is, it's also about how long it gets that light. Orchids really love long days. They need about 12 to 14 hours of bright but indirect light. The perfect spot is usually near an east or west-facing window. It's kind of like what they'd get living under the canopy of a tropical forest.
And now for the million-dollar question. When do you water this thing? My best advice? Forget about a strict weekly schedule. The simplest, most foolproof way is to just let the plant tell you when it's thirsty. And it does that with its roots.
And honestly, it's this simple. If you look at the roots and they're silvery gray, it's time to water. If they're bright green, the plant's already got plenty of water, so you should wait. That's it. Just give it a good soak when it's ready and let all the excess water drain out completely.
Okay, so your plant is healthy, the leaves are the right color, the roots look fantastic, you've totally mastered the basics. Now, for the part we've all been waiting for. How in the world do you get those amazing flowers to come back?
And this can be the most frustrating part, right? You feel like you've done everything you're supposed to, the plant seems happy and healthy, but nothing. No new flower spike. Well, it's often because one key signal from its environment is missing.
And here's the secret. It really comes down to this number. For a few weeks, most common orchids need the temperature to drop at night by about 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. This little temperature change is the trigger. It's the signal that tells the plant, hey, it's time to make some flowers.
And you don't have to do anything crazy to make this happen. A lot of times it'll happen naturally if you just put your orchid near a window in the fall or winter. The goal is to let the nighttime temps dip down to around 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit or about 13 to 18 Celsius. The key is just to avoid keeping it in a room that stays the exact same warm temperature 24/7.
So what do you do with that old flower stem? Well, you've got two choices. If the spike has turned all brown and dry, just cut it all the way back to the base of the plant. That tells the orchid to focus its energy on growing a brand new one. But if the spike is still green and healthy, you can try cutting it just above one of those little bumps. They're called nodes. If you're lucky, this might encourage a new, smaller branch of flowers to grow from there, and a lot more quickly. Now, what if you did everything right? A new spike is growing, tiny little flower buds are forming, and then the worst happens. They shrivel up and fall off before they ever get a chance to open. It's a really common problem, and it's called bud blast. Bud blast is basically your orchid's emergency response to stress. It's the plant's way of saying, whoa, something's wrong, I need to save energy to survive. The usual suspects are sudden shocks, a cold draft from an open window, a blast from an AC vent, a sudden drop in humidity, or even just forgetting to water it. But there's one cause that surprises pretty much everyone.
And this is it. Ripening fruit, especially things like apples and bananas, releases something called ethylene gas. Orchids are incredibly sensitive to this gas. For them, it's a signal to age prematurely, which causes the buds and flowers to just drop. So, the single most important takeaway here is this. Keep your beautiful orchid and your fruit bowl far, far apart.
Okay, I know that was a lot of information, but it really just boils down to a few key habits. So let's wrap it all up with a super simple checklist to keep your orchids happy and blooming for years to come.
Here you go. If you can nail these 5 things, you're golden. 1. Give it 12 to 14 hours of bright, indirect light. 2. Only water when the roots are silvery gray. 3. Make sure it's in a pot with good drainage and a chunky mix. 4. To get those new blooms, give it that cool nighttime temperature drop. And 5. Protect it from drafts and that sneaky gas from your fruit bowl. You know, getting an orchid to rebloom isn't something that happens overnight. It can take months. They really don't operate on our schedule. And in a way, I think that's the whole beauty of it. They reward you for being observant and consistent. They kind of teach us to slow down a little and just appreciate the gradual process of growth. So I wonder, what will yours teach you?